Hello, this is Dr. Tae Kim, and this is my presentation on neurofeedback. I am QEEG certified, and neurofeedback works on the main concept of what they call operant conditioning, which was coined by the B.F. Skinner. He's a famous American psychologist, behaviorist, author, inventor, and he's from Harvard. And he is most famous for putting a lab rat inside of a box that has a button. When the rat presses the button, he gets food as a reward. So operant conditioning works based on a reward system. If you do something right, you get a reward. And this is the mechanism in our brain that we possess the way we learn how to ride a bike. And once you learn how to ride a bike, you can never unlearn it. And it works the same thing for neurofeedback. Once you get enough sessions, the effects will last, if not 30 years or more, if not AKA being permanent. And in order to learn how to ride a bike, you need to pedal, find speed, and balance the bike and continue this process. And once you learn it, you can never unlearn it. In 2010, the concept of neuroplasticity was discovered, meaning that by creating new neural pathways inside of a brain, and if you do it enough, that part of the brain begins to develop and create permanent changes inside the brain, meaning the brain will change, meaning you can't still teach an old dog new tricks. The history of neurofeedback originally started as measuring brainwaves across the board and not knowing what these squiggly lines meant, and they were able to differentiate it by when a person is sleeping, the brainwaves are very slow in terms of the frequency, and they call that delta brainwaves. When people were sleeping and dreaming during rapid eye movement, they thought that the brainwaves were speeding up a little bit. And now when you were awake, there were two different modes. Alpha being slower than beta. Alpha has to do with creative work. Beta requires like focus work, like mathematics and doing things in precision. Gamma brainwaves are to be looked at with higher states of consciousness that people in meditation are doing when they come to like an epiphany and things like that. And neurofeedback originally started with a sad story about cats. These cats, group A was being measured of their brainwaves to quote unquote measure the normal brainwaves of a functioning brain of a cat, compared to a group B where these cats were being chemically induced to have seizures and then die. And they were able to see through the brain map what part of the brain was getting damaged before they died. And they did this experiment where the group that was getting chemically induced to have seizures and die, they targeted the brain that was getting damaged to behave, that part of the brain to behave like that of a cat who were not being chemically induced to have seizures and die. And turns out that these cats stopped having seizures and stopped dying, even though they were being chemically induced to have seizures. This led to the first human trials with neurofeedback. And group A of people were people who had pre-existing history of having seizures compared to people who did not have seizures, and they were able to isolate a part of the brain that were able to have a common denominator of the brain that was not functioning, and in comparison to brains that did not have seizures. And they targeted that part of the brain to behave like that of a group that did not have seizures. And whenever this part of the brain behaved through the reward system, whether it's auditory or visual, they were able to change that part of the brain. And the good news is that they stopped having seizures. And the funding stopped. And one guy that was famous from it was a guy, Dr. Kamiya, who went back to Japan, and he was able to brain map people who were meditators. And through the brain map, he was able to observe who was a beginner, intermediate, and a true master. And the people who had a lot of experience meditating, their alpha and theta brainwaves were off the chart compared to people who did not meditate. And they got people who, with no meditation background, their brains to go through neurofeedback to behave like that of people who did meditate. And people started having Spiritual experiences like feeling happiness for no apparent reason, being more emotionally calm in situations that they would normally react, they slept better, and being more productive in a lot of the things that they did. Now, is neurofeedback safe? The answer is 100% safe for kids and adults. And the FDA regulates that the adverse reactions does not constitute as harms according to their review. Dr. Daniel Amen has done a ton of brain maps over the years, and he was able to identify more than 7 types of ADD and ADHD. And he has learned that only 2 responds with medication out of the 7, and 5 gets worse with medication, and that neurofeedback treats ADD and ADHD with a 90% success rate. And in this picture, you see a normal brain, the way it's supposed to function. There's no such thing as a normal brain. They have what they call a statistical analysis of what a normal brain should function like. And on the right, you see ADHD, where the prefrontal cortex doesn't fire to the speed that it needs to. In this case, the brain is too slow, and therefore they're stuck in a theta brainwave state where they're in dreamies, or in class, the people with ADHD or ADD, they're thinking about something else rather than paying attention to the things in class. And the neurofeedback shows that on the top pictures is the prefrontal cortex not firing correctly. And after neurofeedback, when that part of the brain begins to speed up, and through the reward, it rewards whenever it speeds up, and after a while, it stays at a higher speed than normal, and this part of the brain begins to develop more and more and more like a muscle, and just becomes faster overall. According to research, success rate for treating depression is at 90%, and in my office, we do have a handful of people who were treated with neurofeedback successfully. For ADD and ADHD, which is the main thing why a lot of people come for neurofeedback, is because they don't want their children to go on these medications. And OCD, I have a quick story. When I first got the machine, I hooked myself up, got my brain map, uploaded to the database, got my protocols A and B, and I figured out which I was responding to better, and I stuck to that protocol for about 50 sessions. And 6 months later, after I purchased the machine, I was studying for the boards so I could get my certification. And when I was studying for the OCD chapter, I was reading about nail biting. And I remember having a flashback, my wife telling me, here's a nail clipper, stop asking me for it and put it back where it belongs, because you've been asking me for it for a long time. And I realized, oh my God, I haven't been nail biting for a while, and not even know that neurofeedback had this impact on me. So it was a really cool thing to go through. Success rate for anxiety is at 75%, but research shows that these people need to be on longer sessions. In our office, we have a 100% success rate for bipolar, but the research shows that it only impacts about 60% of the situations. And everyone in my office has been able to reduce their medication working with their psychiatrist, close to about 90% of their medication dramatically. Autism, we do have a handful of children, adults, and teenagers who went through neurofeedback, and we did see improvement. However, I have not seen autism being reversed. Neurofeedback is a biohack to reap the benefits of meditation, and the Dalai Lama expressed a lot of interest in this because he believes that meditation is very hard. Now, how long does it take for you to see the results? This is a common question that I get a lot. We do not take everybody into the program, because if you're away from the treatments for more than 2 weeks at a time, the brain begins to what they call backslide, revert back to its original form. And the UCLA study showed that whether the session is 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour, it doesn't matter how long the session takes, as long as it exceeds 30 minutes. In our office, we give sessions for about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how busy we are. And whether you come once a week, twice a week, or 3 times a week, they don't recommend more than coming twice a week. But the sweet spot is the 50 session mark. If you get 50 sessions, you're getting enough neurofeedback to create a permanent change in a specific part of the brain. In other words, one example is the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed to the speed that it should be. By making that part of the brain faster, the whole brain changes so that you're able to regulate your emotions and things like that a lot better. It takes about 15 to 20 or sometimes 25 sessions for most people to start beginning to feel the changes. And what do they see? They start being more productive. In other words, we had this lady who cleaned up her entire garage and not knowing, come back to me, hey, I don't think this stuff is working for me. I'm like, were you being more productive than usual? She's like, yeah, I cleaned up the whole garage. Or I've seen teenagers do all of their homework as soon as they come home without being told for no apparent reason. Very rare individuals see changes in 1 to 5 sessions, but generally it takes about 15 to 20 to 25 sessions for them to begin to feel the effects. Now, this is all scientific research. The military saw the marksmanship improvement, and what they are finding was that it takes about 175 hours to train a person to shoot a moving target from 200 yards away, aka sniping. And when people were put on neurofeedback and were trained to shoot for sniping purposes, it took them about 80 somewhat hours. So it doubles a person's learning rate. Pilots were able to fly, making less errors, according to the research. And across the board for the sports, the cognitive, and the arts people were able to improve their craft by a lot. And it also increases their emotional intelligence. A lot of people, when they get into heated conversations, they report that the other person was very agitated and I stayed calm and I was able to hear them and not respond emotionally. And I can attest to this with my wife and myself when I was on neurofeedback. My wife told me that when you come home from work, you're drinking something out of the refrigerator, leaving it there, and making a mess everywhere you go. And after getting neurofeedback, when my wife told me you're making a mess, my usual response is, I'm tired, I'm home, why can't you take care of me? And I saw that how obsessed she was. I'm like, you know what, you're right, I am making a mess everywhere. And I started cleaning up, and she felt bad because I did come home late from working, and she's like, I'm cleaning up after my own mess, and she wants to take care of me. So that was a really good, pleasant surprise for her and me. What doctors used to take 2 hours of procedure only took about an hour and a half after they were on neurofeedback, meaning just like the pilots, they were able to make less errors, more efficient movements of that sort. People make better decisions in terms of, especially in business. The Imperial College of London Music improved dramatically. They played better without having to meet as often to practice and perform. People are able to dance better by relating to the mood, the music, the beat, and so forth. The Italian soccer team won the 2006 World Cup, and they were not being very vocal about it. Afterward, and their secret weapon was neurofeedback. Carrie and Misty won the 2012 gold medal, and they were being very vocal about their experiences in neurofeedback. And according to their interview, they were able to get into the zone better after neurofeedback. In fact, in 2016, the Olympic Committee deemed the technology not cheating for any athletes using neurofeedback. Dave Asprey has spent a lot of money. The 300,000 figure is outdated, but even till today, he believes that the neurofeedback is one of the most impactful things that he has done in his entire life. And Tony Robbins gained the ability to write an email and engage in a phone conversation that is not about the email. And he truly gained the ability to multitask. And my experience treating patients with neurofeedback is that everyone across the board just are able to tap into their peak performance in terms of productivity and lower their emotional reactiveness. So I hope this answers a lot of your questions. So if you like this video, please like hit subscribe, and I see you in the near future. Bye.